Okay, welcome everyone to this session of Monitoring and Evaluation Panel 4. We're going to be talking about in this session monitoring and evaluation of non-energy benefits. While energy efficiency is important to all of us here at eceee, that doesn't mean that it's always a priority for everyone that we are coming in contact with. And so communicating about co-benefits or multiple benefits of energy efficiency can broaden the appeal of energy efficiency measures for many other stakeholders. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this session. What are the co-benefits we should consider? How do we measure these? And how do we communicate about them to raise the salience of energy efficiency measures, as well as the co-benefits and multiple impacts that they are associated with? First up, we have Nazifa Rafa, who has recently graduated from Asian University for Women and will be commencing her graduate studies in environmental policy this autumn at University of Cambridge. She is passionate about sustainable development in Bangladesh and has been extensively involved in research of wide sustainability topics. And today she will be presenting about the multiple impacts of energy efficiency measures in different socioeconomic contexts and the energy savings for higher well-being. Okay, so we will put up the presentation by Nazifa and then we will have a Q&A.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Rafa, a fresh graduate from the Asian University for Women, and today I will be presenting our paper, Context Matters, a study of multiple impacts of energy efficiency measures in the EU27 and South Asia on behalf of my co-authors. So this is basically what I will be discussing today. I will be starting off with a brief background for our study, and then I'll talk about how energy efficiency can serve as the first fuel, and then I'll talk about how energy efficiency has progressed over the years, and then I'll be basically discussing our study's objectives, methods, results, and discussion and conclusion. So as we all know, the global energy demand has been growing substantially over the years, and consequently, so has the global energy consumption. So if we were to trace the pattern, if we say, for example, let's set 1990 as our base scenario, we can see that by 2019, our global energy consumption has grown rapidly, both in absolute terms and in relative terms. And if this trend were to continue, our global energy consumption can grow to up to 50% by the year 2030. Now, this is alarming because much of our energy comes from fossil-based fuel sources. And if we were to progress towards our climate goals of limiting our average global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need to drastically lower our global energy demand. Now, to lower our global energy demand, our energy efficiency can actually play a pivotal role. Now, we know that to lower our energy demand and GHG emissions due to our energy consumption, we need to bring significant changes to our energy systems. So for one, we actually need to shift away from fossil-based fuel sources to renewable energy sources. And we also need sophisticated energy storage systems. Now, these are all not easy because they need significant amount of investments. And we also know that the usage of renewable energy sources, they're subject of much criticisms because they have negative impacts on the environment. Also, implementing these cannot be immediate. What we need is something immediate, such as energy efficiency measures. So if we were to implement energy efficiency measures, we can immediately address our energy demand. And this is why energy efficiency is often seen as first fuel. So what this slide here shows is basically that there have been improvements in energy efficiency over the years. So for example, advanced economies such as the US and the UK, for example, they have been able to sustain a stable economic growth, but they did not contribute as much to our GHG emissions. This was all because of improvements in energy efficiency measures. So at a global perspective, energy efficiency measures can be seen to contribute to our climate goals. So because they bring about energy savings, they reduce GHG emissions, and this is how it's helping us reach our climate targets. But energy efficiency measures can also have non-climate local benefits, such as improved health, employment generation, improved productivity, and so on. These local non-climate benefits are often popularly known as co-benefits or multiple impacts, and they're actually known by many more terms. So we actually need to understand how energy efficiency has progressed over the years. And we use different indicators to measure the progress. So for example, we use energy intensity and TFC's total final consumption. So what this slide here shows basically is that there have been improvements in energy efficiency, but the progress has not been significant enough to reach our sustainable development goals or our climate goals. So if we were to take the example of the energy intensity, even though there have been a decrease in energy intensity globally, the world has consistently not been able to meet the annual reduction goal of 2.6% of energy intensity for the Sustainable Development Goal 7.3. To your right, what you see is another indicator, the TFC. So other than measuring the progress of energy efficiency, what the TFCs show basically is it allows us to see what are the most important sectors in different countries. So for example, in the EU27, transportation comprises the largest share of TFCs. However, in the EU27, the residential sector is the major recipient of energy efficiency measures. So the main energy efficiency measure that they receive are basically in the form of energy retrofits in buildings. In South Asia, on the other hand, what we know is that the industrial sector represents the largest share of TFC. Unlike the EU27, however, because the energy infrastructure is not mature enough, the renewables contribute very little to the energy supply. So this makes South Asia contribute to 7% of the total GHG emissions. So why the focus on EU27 and South Asia? This is because they actually represent very different socioeconomic contexts. And when I say context, I do mean several different layers. So it can be in terms of demographics, in terms of climate, in terms of economy. So, for example, the EU27 is a much more resourceful region compared to South Asia. Like I mentioned, South Asia does not have mature energy infrastructures. So, but when we're talking about our global climate goal of limiting our average global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, just focusing on EU27 will not serve the purpose. Developing regions such as South Asia also need to be taken into account. So because energy efficiency has such an important role in limiting the temperature to rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we wanted to see through our study how energy efficiency measures performed in these two regions, what kind of incentives motivated the uptake of different energy efficiency measures, what kind of co-benefits these energy efficiency measures had. To answer our objectives, we adopted a two-tiered methodological approach. So the first tier, what we did was we basically conducted a focused literature review to find out the kind of specific EMs that were implemented in the two regions, their corresponding co-benefits, and how large they were. And also we also wanted to see whether any studies conducted cost benefit analysis. Now, to discuss the cost benefit analysis part a bit, when we are assessing an energy efficiency policy, we basically take into account the cost of implementing the policy, as well as any benefit that the policy can have. So like I mentioned, a benefit would be the energy savings, but co-benefits such as improved productivity also need to be taken into account when we are measuring the cost benefit, when we are conducting the cost benefit analysis of the energy efficiency measure. So from the data reported in the literature that we obtained from our tier 1, we conducted a meta-analysis to find out what kind of incentives motivated the uptake of EMs in the two regions, and what were their corresponding co-benefits, and whether these co-benefits could serve as incentives to take up further EMs in these two regions. So the following slides present our findings, and as you can see, this table here presents the studies the studies conducted in the EU27 region. And as you can see here, most of the studies have actually attempted to quantify and monetize the co-benefits of EMs. And this is why, because of this quantification and monetization, we can get values such as the net present value that allows us to make such interpretations. what this figure here displays is that um, this was actually compiled from the data of EU Horizon 2020 project, which attempted to quantify and monetize the co-benefits of building refurbishments. And what this figure here basically present is that when we incorporate the co-benefits of these building refurbishment measures, the net present value or the NPV value is significantly lower, which makes which allows us to see just how cost effective and lucrative energy efficiency measures can be. So this was actually the primary objective of many of the studies here to help show how cost effective and how useful energy efficiency measures can be for the region. On the other hand, the scenario for South Asia is actually quite different. So there were actually very few studies that actually discussed about energy efficiency measures in South Asia, and there were far fewer studies that actually attempted to quantify the co-benefits. So many co-benefits were actually reported, but not many were quantified, as you can see here. So moving on to this table here, this basically presents our findings. And as you can see, majority of the EMs that in the EU27 were basically energy retrofits of buildings. And in the South Asia, the main EMs that were frequently cited were the use of improved fuel sources. And there were some major co-benefits, some common co-benefits between the two as well. So basically health benefits and the reduced air pollution were some of the common benefits. But our study does also present a different angle. So for example, especially for the South Asian region. So in what the studies tried to find out was, other than energy savings, what other benefits could the energy efficiency measures bring about for this region? Now, because this South Asian region is very constricted in terms of financial resources, they're trying to look at whether energy efficiency measures can bring about developmental benefits. So, for example, health benefits, reduced air pollution, these are all developmental, these can all deliver developmental benefits. And there were actually two studies that showed how co-benefits of energy efficiency measures can help deliver developmental benefits and help the South Asian region progress with their sustainable developmental goal targets. So for South Asian region, climate goals alone cannot motivate the region to take up energy efficiency measures. There actually needs to be there needs to be enough developmental goals to encourage them to take up energy efficiency measures. What this figure also shows is that in the EU27, there were many more co-benefits cited, but in the South Asian region, there were actually some key co-benefits that were frequently cited. So there needs to be further research done in the South Asian region to actually comprehensively identify and measure and attempt to quantify the co-benefits of energy efficiency measures. So these are basically our conclusion. And it is that the long run goals for the two regions are the same. How they differ in is the co-benefits of the EMs. So in the EU, for example, because the studies attempted to quantify and monetize the co-benefits, they tried to make EMs look more favorable to the policymakers. So, for example, they produced net present values that helped them show how energy efficiency measures can actually be cost effective. In South Asia, on the other hand, quantification and monetization is a huge challenge because they're all struggling to attain energy self-sufficiency. What also needs to work for them is that energy efficiency measures need to develop developmental goals. Specifically, it needs to allow the South Asian countries to progress towards sustainable development goals, because climate goals alone cannot motivate them to take up more energy efficiency measures. And then because of the huge data scarcity that exists in the South Asian region, future research needs to be directed to further quantify and monetize the co-benefits based on primary data, because such secondary literature does not exist. So there needs to be much more field work conducted to find out, to provide empirical evidence of the benefits, the developmental benefits of the energy efficiency measures in South Asia. And so this is it from my side. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Naziva, for a very interesting presentation there. While we're waiting to see if our audience has some questions from your presentation, I might ask a couple of questions based on that, if I may. And I found it very interesting that you found more of the variety of co-benefits in the EU countries than you did in the South Asian context. And I'm wondering, when you said we need to do more research for the South Asian context looking at co-benefits, do you think that that can be a starting point, looking at what was found, the range in the EU, and looking whether those actually are also relevant for the South Asian context? Is that did you find that there was some transferability between the multiple benefits that you were looking at between contexts?
Yes, so we did found a few common multiple benefits in both regions. So for example, health benefits and reduced air pollution were two of the most commonly reported co-benefit, and we did feel that these specific multiple impacts were transferable for both regions. And for South Asia specifically, these can be very significant because health benefit and reduced air pollution, these are some of the main priorities of this region. So in that sense, we have some learnings to take from the EU27 and transfer them to the South Asia.
Yep. And some of the ones that you found in the EU context that you didn't necessarily find studies on in the South Asian, do you think that they're relevant for South Asia?
So it's a bit difficult to say because for South Asia, for example, we do have the co-benefits are the findings on the co-benefits that were reported. That's relevant. But in terms of South Asia, it's very difficult to say because the per level household data is very low in South Asia. So we do not, for example, because we are in this area, they're struggling with energy self-sufficiency. So they're always prioritizing the demand side policies rather than supply side policies. So for this area particularly, it's the provision of energy that's often prioritized. So after the demand has been met, that's when we talk about the how kind of multiple benefits that we can have. So in terms of, for example, if we were to measure things like increased productivity as a multiple impact of the energy efficiency measure, we need many kinds of data. For example, the presenteeism and absenteeism in work areas, which is not easily found for these areas. Such kind of data is what we need to actually understand how cost effective or how beneficial energy efficiency measures can be for this region.
Okay, thanks, Naziva. You talk also about doing a cost benefit analysis there, which also requires data and also valuation. How did you feel about that process? Do you think that there is enough information of all the costs on one side and all the benefits on another? Because you still talk about in the paper, at least, also having a positive net present value and even then the investment costs. Do you think that there's more work that could be done or more data that you would like to see? I think particularly you mentioned in the South Asian region that could help do a more comprehensive cost benefit analysis, or one that would maybe push it over the line towards more investment being made in this area. What do you think?
So it's a bit difficult to justify methods like cost benefit analysis because there are certain things that we cannot put a value on, and there are criticisms to it, and it can lead to overvaluation or undervaluation. And when we are talking about something like energy efficiency, we're talking about something that has issues with measurement, right? Because we're trying to measure the negative amount of the energy that's saved. So but cost benefit methods like cost benefit analysis is a good start. So like many different researchers can vary in terms of the break-even period of the investments, but cost benefit analysis is a good start in terms of if we were to incorporate the multiple impacts in the cost benefit analysis of the energy efficiency measures.
Okay, thanks. We have a question from our audience here too. Katie Yanda says, great presentation. Does the speaker have any thoughts on the differences in co-benefits between studies focused on heating, relevant for Europe mostly, versus cooling, relevant for South Asia?
So we know that for Europe, the most commonly selected energy efficiency measures were energy retrofits in buildings, so which dealt with more about heating, right? But then for South Asia, the initiatives taken to cooling, we do not, we basically take initiatives for active cooling, and we do not really consider passive cooling. So things like that, these are very difficult to take into account when we are analyzing the actual how cost effective the energy efficiency measure can be. So it's again, I'd say that it may be difficult to actually come to a conclusion as to how comparable these two regions can be.
Jessica, if I
Yep.
may add on Nazifa's point. So
Yep.
basically, cost benefit analysis is a must, because that gives us a proper understanding on whether that energy efficiency measure is feasible or not. But without incorporating the co-benefit into cost benefit analysis, that greatly undervalues the potential of energy efficiency measure. And that is the case in both South Asia as well as in EU27. But in EU27, since we could monetize, some of the co-benefits at least because of data availability and other resourceful usage, but in South Asia, most of these co-benefits are not quantifiable. However, what we can see with our study that this co-benefit can help us achieving SDG goals. And this SDG goals has, proper indicators, and for which we can do a primary study to collect the primary data. So that can be a way out, which we have discussed in our conclusion as well. Secondly, regarding heating and cooling pattern, that's absolutely the case. I agree that there is a difference, but that's why we call that retrofitting of buildings. And building retrofitting is required both in EU as well as South Asian countries whenever the life cycle of the building gets over. For EU, the retrofitted needed is required is to protect the thermal comfort and heating level, whereas in South Asia it is required at least to minimize the energy loss from the cooling. So that's basically the difference. Otherwise, more or less, it is in a way same when it comes to retrofitting. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, that is all we have time for in this short discussion. We might revisit some of these topics in the last 10 minutes of the session today. Thank you very much to both Nazifa and Suran. Again, you can read their paper later in the proceedings to find out more, and perhaps also find them if you've got a follow-up question if we don't get to it. Okay, I will introduce now our next speaker. So we have Sune Grolov here, who is an experienced senior policy advisor at Velux with a long history of working in the building materials industry and with policy analysis. And today he's going to present with co-authors the study that they did on the impacts of indoor environment in our homes and schools on child health in Europe. So we're going to play the presentation and then again have a bit of time to ask you some questions, Sune.
Great, thank you very much. So, and I think this is the recorded the presentation. I think we should use the PPT, the PowerPoint version.
Okay, bear with me just one moment, Suna.
Yeah. I have just resent it. Oh, there it is. Okay, great. Thank you very much, and thank you all for participating in this this kind of softer discussion on the aspect of energy efficiency. Usually, we always talk about how energy efficiency is all about cost savings, about saving energy, but the whole aspects of the softer part, like health, are often not discussed, and therefore I was really glad to hear the presentation just before, just pointing out some of the more very important subjects of how energy efficiency can deliver on many different areas. If you proceed, please. Next slide. Yes. So before going into our study, I just want to give a little bit of background, and this is probably not news for you, but you know that in April that the EU has agreed on a climate law, which says that not only that we are hitting climate neutrality by 2050, but also in 2030 we need to reduce CO2 emission at least by 55%. On top of that, we just had the announcement yesterday from Ursula von der Leyen in the European Parliament that already next week some of the first recovery plans that are designated for EU countries, they will begin to have their plans approved, and so this is really a point of time where we have not only just urgency because of the climate targets, but also a situation where the financial gates are really open and we can start this mass renovation of the European building stock, which is needed for 2030 and 2050 at least. And usually what we talk about here is, of course, that buildings consume 40% of our energy in Europe. Oh, we're moving a little bit too fast, I think.
I'm sorry, Suna. I think there might be some timings in your presentation. Bear with me again, and I'll get it back for you.
No problem. I'll just continue talking.
Thank you.
So, so basically, what we're looking at is a really once in a generation opportunity to promote building renovation around Europe, and not at least we should consider in that context that it's not just about reducing energy, even though the European Buildings Directive is called Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. It should not just only focus on energy consumption. Buildings are made for people, and we should consider the needs of people. After all, we spend 90% of our time indoor. So it has really vast consequences for our health. And this is something that the Velux have been very preoccupied with for a number of years. Okay, great. And if you can move on to the next one here. So this is why we started the Healthy Homes Barometers. These are scientific publications that we've been doing since 2015, where we cooperate with our esteemed European Research Institute, such as Ecofis, Fraunhofer, and latest RAND Europe. And what we try to do is we would dig into how taking the pulse of the European building stock and really try to see what are the correlation between health and the condition of the building. So the last barometer we did was in 2019 barometer, and there we took a look at how unhealthy buildings affects children's life and their health, especially, of course. And what we found, next slide, please, is that that when we look at the adults around Europe, earlier studies have shown that 1 out of 6 European adults that report living in unhealthy buildings. That I go back to what defines an unhealthy building. Those are the many that lives in that. And when we look at the children, the case is actually much more severe. And please change the next one. So we would need to ask ourselves, are our homes making our children sick? And what we found out is that 1 out of 3 European children live in unhealthy buildings. So that's a really considerable amount of people. That is 26 million children in all. That's the entire population of Scandinavia, basically. So it is quite a big problem. And if we can move on to the next slide, please. We can see that the risk factors they live with are something like cold temperatures, there are excessive noise, there are that you have not enough daylight, and it's too damp and mold. And this one moves really fast. Sorry about that. But for a child who lives with just one risk factor, the likability of that child being reported ill is 1.7 times higher than for another child in average. And if you live with all four risk factors, you actually are 2.4 times more likely to report poor health. So this is it's a quite significant correlation. And when we did this study together with RAND Europe, which is a nonprofit research institute, they at first had other ideas of how to plan the research, but when they did the statistic correlation in the Eurostat database, they really saw that the correlation was so strong that they had to change their plans because there was a lot of extra additional study they wouldn't have to do. Basically, the SIL database, which consists of over 250,000 respondents, does deliver a very good material on how the respondents, their self-reported health, which is actually a very good measurement for people's actual health. And we can move on to the next slide. So when you live in an unhealthy building, the children are put at risk for many kind of diseases, and you see some of them here. It's all from eceee, cold and viruses, asthma and allergies. And if you live in a building with damp and mold, you have a 40% higher chance of getting asthma than a regular building. And this is quite stunning because a lot of these diseases you see here that could stem from buildings, unhealthy buildings, they seem to follow you for the rest of your life in many cases. So we do find these numbers quite alarming and significant. Next slide, please. And when we look across Europe, we'll see that the European averages, as I mentioned before, 1 out of 3 that are at risk in relation to unhealthy buildings. And what you see is it varies quite a lot of how big a problem it actually is. You have in countries like Portugal, Cyprus, and Greece, and Bulgaria that has very poor performance here, but also a rich country like United Kingdom is not doing well. On the other hand, you have Finland, Estonia, and Croatia who are doing quite well, but are they really? Because a country like Finland, who's the best performing compared to European average, you still see that it's 20% of the children that lives in unhealthy buildings. So the problem is there and it's everywhere, and it's not related to social factors. So you will be harmed by it, rich or poor. However, it does have a social impact in the sense that you have a lot bigger amount of children from low income groups that lives in unhealthy building. This is not surprising, and you do see that reflected in the numbers as well. Next slide, please. So how to actually put a value on that? This is difficult, but we use a system called DALI, disability adjusted life years. So basically what we say is it's a way of calculating that the World Health Organization is using. So what you say is that if you have an ideal lifespan, which is the top bar, you compare that to a life with the actual health situation, and that is with unhealthy buildings. And you see that that a child who lives in an unhealthy building, and that could just be one of the risk factors, they will lose up to 37,000 life years in all over Europe. So 37,000 life years, that's quite a significant number. And you can say that, well, is that a high or low number when you take a whole European population? Well, you can say that just 1 life years is too much to lose that because of unhealthy building. And when you compare it to something like secondhand smoking, which we have become very much aware of in our society, the 37,000 years of lost healthy lives that stems from, for instance, from childhood asthma is equivalent to 1/3 of the secondhand smoking. So just by focusing on asthma, you really see that there is a grave problem here. Next slide, please. The good news is that a lot can be done. And when we look at schools, for instance, if we start with defining what the problem is, you see that that each year diseases from damp and mold is responsible for European children missing 1.7 million school days. So each child in Europe misses just about 2.5 school day each year. So that might not seem like a significant number either, but when you think about this, is of course on top of the absence caused by other factors like other illnesses that are not related to the damp and mold in the homes, and other reasons also not related to illness. So that is quite the big productivity loss for Europe. And if we turn on to the next one, please, I click again. We also know that there's a big Fraunhofer study showed that if you improve the air quality in the schoolrooms, you can actually boost students' performance by 50%. So 15% is quite significant, and that's only by adjusting air quality to the recommended standards. It's not addressing all the risk factors. We also know that lack of daylight have a significant meaning for your performance. If you do a test close to a window, you perform much better than if you do it in the dark side of the classroom. So we do have a possibility of really clicking into improving this area around Europe. And even a country like Denmark, where we claim to have a very good building stock, we know that schools are really in the need of renovation. So there's a big potential, not just in the poor countries of Europe, but all over. So next slide, please. And then let's move on to the economic figures here, because we're talking about a green transition towards 2050 that's going to be really, really expensive, and it's going to be a huge investment. But the great thing about energy efficiency buildings is, if it's done right, where you actually make sure to improve the condition of the house or the building, you are able to get some significant paybacks. And here we have a 40-year perspective, and simply by increasing the ventilation in schools, you could improve the societal economy by almost like 250 billion euros. And if you reduce the exposure of damp and molds in homes at the same time, you will altogether get more than 300 billion euros in 2060. So this is just for the homes, it's just one risk factor, because this is where we have the most direct correlation we can actually make it. But we know that other risk factors like excessive noise and lack of daylight also plays a big part here. So if we were able to statistically prove this, we would have a significant higher number of the multiple benefits and the health benefits for European society by 2060. Next slide, please. So looking at the possibilities there is, these are some of the factors that we need to look at. Proper ventilation, good artistic, accurate daylight, and comfortable temperatures, humidity levels, and artificial lighting. And these are all things that we should take into account when we do our building legislation, and when we also want to inform the population. Because a very interesting fact is, and this came with the European Green Deal, the Navigant did a study for the Commission showing that when you ask consumers around Europe, that would be buildings owner, homeowners, why they did renovate, the motivation for this or driver for this was 88% of them said that they believe that it makes my residents healthier. So people don't renovate because they want to save energy usually. They can sometimes do it for economic reasons, but definitely some of the softer aspects are quite important to motivate building owners. And this is also a way to make sure that we don't just use either very strict legislation to incentivize building owners to renovate, or very generous schemes, renovation schemes to do that. You can also just inform about the qualities and the need for healthy buildings, and you'll see a lot of building owners do it by themselves. And this is something that we definitely need to consider when we're rolling out the renovation wave and revise the buildings directive, the EPBD. when we're tripling, if we want to triple the renovation rate in Europe, we should definitely ensure that the decarbonized building stock goes hand in hand with the healthy building stock. So I think we owe that to the coming generations, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Suni. I think we're a little behind time, but you started a little late. So let's ask you one question here. So one thing that I got from your presentation too is that clearly there's a lot of benefits to intervening with healthy homes, and particularly child health. When we look at from a health perspective, anything that you can do to change child development will have impacts for the rest of their life. But do you see then that maybe the health would be then the primary benefit, and that energy efficiency is actually the co-benefit? So turning it on its head a little bit to what we've been discussing before, is that what you would be arguing to the policymakers?
Well, I think that it's important to know that both aspects can motivate buildings owners, and people have different reasons to renovate, and for sure a lot of the renovation that happens around the private homes are usually controlled by women, and to be kind of gender sexist here, the statistics shows that women takes a lot of decision when it comes to the home, and also have some control of the economy in that aspect, and that they will be more willing to invest in to ensure the health of the family. And so I'm just saying this is quite important aspect, and it's definitely something that European politicians should bring in the legislation for its own sake, but also to motivate the buildings owner. You need more information about it and raise awareness, basically.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much for an in-depth view of the health benefits. It's come up as one of the co-benefits in other talks, and may come up again. I think it would be great if at the end we revisit this and also look at if we have any trade-offs between some of these benefits and energy efficiency as well.
Right.
We will have a plenary discussion in the last 10 minutes. I hope we will have time for this. Thank you so much, Sune. And we go on to our next speaker here. Our next speaker is Catherine Coremans. And Catherine Corman will be talking about valuing and communicating the multiple benefits of energy efficiency projects. Catherine Cormans is a senior researcher at the University of Lausanne in industrial ecology, in the industrial ecology group, as well as an associate at Eco-Diagnostic, where she is part of a team of academics specialized in providing socio-economic policy and business management analysis and advice to public, private, national, and international organizations. And as I understand, the results that you'll be presenting today, Catherine, come from an H2020 project, M Benefits, where you also looked at pilots testing, or the 5 pilots in Switzerland. So you will be presenting your own slides, so you can go ahead and share your screen, and you have the floor, Catherine.
Thank you. That's it. You can see my slides?
Yes, we see them.
Okay. And you can hear me also. Yes, I guess. Okay, so thank you for the nice introduction. Yes, I will describe here how we can first identify, then value and communicate the multiple benefits of energy efficiency projects. And I will present some results from the Swiss work on M benefits. It's a very interesting session, because actually what we've seen until now, it's the presentation by Suran was mostly on the what I call the public multiple benefits, or the benefits at the societal level or macroeconomic level. And the second presentation was a mix between public benefits and private benefits. I will focus here on private benefits at the level of energy efficiency projects, so benefits for companies or for organizations in a wider meaning. This is the outline of my presentation after a very short introduction and a short description of the context and theoretical background. I will introduce to you the M benefits method, because it doesn't make sense to describe results if you don't have an idea about the method itself. then the toolkit we developed with the method, some pilot project example, and a conclusion. In introduction, I just would like to say that I mentioned that this project or my presentation now takes place within the framework of Horizon 2020 project. And yeah, thank you to the EU for financing this big effort. We were 15 partners in 11 countries. The context and theoretical background of my work, and actually of this project on multiple benefits, is the fact that, as many of you have noticed in their work or in their research, the conventional approach to energy efficiency projects doesn't work or doesn't work well or well enough. So this approach means translating energy savings into monetary savings, and the economic rationality would like that if a project is profitable, then there will be a positive investment decision. And actually, it doesn't work well enough. So based on that fact, I started investigating what are the factors, so the barriers and drivers, explaining firms' energy efficiency investment decisions. And this brought me to redesigning the market barriers concept. I'm sure that all of you who work in research are familiar with this concept of market barriers, which, I mean, you can find hundreds of barriers. It's sometimes pretty depressing. Anyway, I came with a new concept of the market barriers, saying that the first barrier, the base barrier, is information, and then you have actually symptom barriers. These are the barriers described in the literature, actually. The most important are access to capital, the high level of risk, hidden cost, lack of top management time and interest, and so on. In my view and in my framework, theoretical framework, these barriers are just the expression of deeper barriers, which are the no strategic character of investment, and then the influence of cultures and subcultures, which makes that actors actually don't have the same vision, the same analysis of projects. So based on this concept, if it's not strategic, make it strategic. How do you do that? You can do that by including non-energy benefits and sound strategic and financial evaluation in a non-technical format in energy audits or project descriptions. And of course, to overcome the cultural barriers, try to customize communication. And this is really the main concepts which underlie the development of the M benefits method. This method, it's actually a decision support tool for investment projects. It includes complementary analysis. It takes into account the subcultures and the interests of all company departments or organization departments, because it can be applied to any type of public administration. The method does not provide default values for non-energy benefits because projects are too different. It applies, though, to any type of project, activity, or organization, and it is clear and simple to apply. Therefore, this method increases, and this is the basic goal of it, the attractiveness of an investment project and thus its chances of being approved. And I would like to say also that the question or the concept of the non-energy benefits of energy efficiency projects is mentioned in the literature and by practitioners for now about 20 years, but no method was provided to analyze projects ex ante, so before a decision is made. And non-energy benefits were always analyzed and investigated ex post, so after implementation of the project. So we try to fill the gap here. You see the method here. So starting with a project idea, our goal is to positively influence investment decision. And we do that in 4 steps, 4 analytical steps. One is the company analysis, just to set up the stage and understand what is our customer, if I can describe it like that. Then a joint analysis of the energy and operational aspects of the project. Then the strategic impacts of our energy efficiency investment project, and finally the financial impacts. The financial impacts are not the last ones because they are the most important ones, actually not at all, because the strategic dimension is more important. But you actually evaluate quantitatively the impacts at the strategic analysis step, and then you translate them in a financial analysis later on. I will jump immediately for time reason to the operational analysis. So operational analysis is step 2.2 after the energy analysis, and it answers the question, what is the project's contribution to operational excellence? Operational excellence is composed of 4 dimensions: safety for people, employees, quality of products and process, cost, including all costs for the organization, and time. This is not something you can find in the literature. It's based on companies' practice, these 4 dimensions. But it's interesting because you can actually analyze these 4 dimensions in any type of organization. Some dimensions don't apply to any type of project. I give you an example of this approach here. You see that it's an industrial bakery. You can go and find them here. It's Fortisa, it's their name. And they mentioned that they're proud to mention that they have a Swiss precision in their manufacturing process, that every product meets specifications exactly, and millimeter precision is guaranteed. Quality is their top priority. And actually, you of course, to achieve that, you need energy, but most importantly, you need energy services. And this is a completely different view on an energy efficiency project. So you see here, for instance, that you want to replace a baking oven in this industrial bakery. So this is your energy efficiency measure. And the common, usual, conventional view of the energy experts would be to analyze the decrease in natural gas or heating oil or electricity if you replace this baking oven. But more importantly for the company, what is important is actually the quality of the heat, which will be improved, and the reduced preheating time because they could produce more. So you see that we really need to change, to enlarge the approach. And because for the company, this change in oven will improve the product quality and stability and could even increase production. And this is much, much more important than just a decrease in energy consumption. The step 3 is the strategic analysis. Answering the question, what is the project contribution to the company's competitive advantage? And the concept of competitive advantage is again composed of some different dimensions, 3 dimensions. It's the impact of a project on the company's value proposition, which translates into revenue growth, if the impact is positive. Then the impact on risks and the impact on cost. So if you have a decrease in cost, a decrease in risk, and a high impact on a company's value proposition, then you have a highly strategic investment project. And this is what we are trying to assess here. If I take again the example of the bakery, The conventional energy expert analysis would be to analyze the impact on lower energy and carbon costs. Now you have understood that we will not only limit ourselves to this impact, but actually there will be an increased product quality, improved product stability, increased staff satisfaction, a lot of risks are decreased, and other costs such as workforce productivity, increased equipment productivity. This translates into less employees cost, lower cost of product not conforming to specification, and lower maintenance costs. So you see that here the project becomes much more attractive to the decision makers of the company. And finally, you go into a very, very conventional financial analysis where you analyze the financial attractiveness of the project, meaning assessing the profitability and the payback. This method is now embedded into a toolkit. So the method itself, it's 4 analysis steps, and the 5th steps is a communication. We have developed a software, including very nice and easy features for the user. We include a non-energy benefits checklist of about 60 benefits, which is a lot. And we also have we provide a template for results presentation. We have training workshops. I give you here an example of, I was very pleased that the energy experts of 3M United States and Canada attended the workshop I gave in February, and they were actually very pleased with this one-day virtual workshop, and they assessed that this approach was relevant to their work and to their organization. I intended to describe 3 projects here, 3 pilot projects, but for reason of time, I won't. So, but you have my email address at the end of the presentation. So please don't hesitate to contact me, and I will send you a larger presentation. I was responsible for 5 projects in the French-speaking part of Switzerland. And this was part of, in total, 27 projects which were carried out in the EU, apart from what I've done in Switzerland. So I will show you here Nestlé. It's the project is called Bergère B. So it's the full renovation of Nestlé headquarters in Vevey. It's along the lake. It's just a completely beautiful location. And I wanted to give you here a view of the operational analysis, also to show you that you don't have absolutely to select industrial processes. You can also focus on operational and management processes. And this means that you can apply the approach to commercial buildings, tertiary buildings, and so on. But you see that you have this logic here of changing some pieces of equipment, reducing energy fuel consumption, improving, in this case, all the all the energy services in the building, and improving for the same reason, your operational and management process. I see that I'm running out of time, so I will go faster until the end. Regarding the operational analysis, you have increased safety, reduced operational cost. Regarding the value cost risk analysis for the global renovation of the building, you have a lot of risk reduced, a lot of impact on the value proposition, and it's not only regarding an improvement of image, but it's an improvement of organizational resources and improved technological resources, contribution to the CO2 strategy, which is extremely important for Nestlé, and reduction of several costs apart from energy and carbon cost. You have here the details of the non-energy benefits we have assessed. And actually you see that non-energy benefits are 10 times more important than the energy benefits. And of course, this was done in collaboration with Nestlé managers, and the figures here are validated. Therefore, the financial analysis is also pretty striking, because we come from a simple payback of 49 years, which doesn't make sense in financial terms, down to a simple payback of 8 years, which is not a lot for a complete renovation of a building. I indicated the discount rate and the duration of the investment. So this project is also worthwhile because it enables the company to fulfill its strategic missions and objectives. It contributes to operational efficiency, it contributes to financial efficiency, and it increases the value of real estate assets. So you see that we are much farther than, again, just the energy benefits. In conclusion, our M-benefits approach increases the attractiveness of projects, which is its goal, as I mentioned, because it takes into account all main corporate interests. It bridges the gap between energy people and non-energy people, if we can label them so. It's well beyond energy savings, and it makes energy efficiency strategic and more profitable. And I thank you for your attention.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. Catherine, we are over time, but I do want to ask, one of the questions that was posed was about can this be downloaded from the M-benefits website, the toolkit, freely?
No, the toolkit is not publicly available. This is being discussed now. We don't know exactly how we will. Our idea is to build a network of competent and motivated professionals. So again, people interested could contact me or could contact Clemens Rode, who is the coordinator of the Horizon 2020 project.
Okay, we do have a couple more questions which are in the chat and on the Whova platform. Maybe we can write a reply to those, or we can come back to it at the end of the session if we have some time in the plenary.
It's up to you, but I'm one minute before my 20 minutes, but that's fine. I don't want
it's 15 plus 5 for questions. So we would like to have the 5 for questions. So yeah, unfortunately, we do want to give time to our last speaker, and then we can come back at the end. But we want to make sure that everybody has their 15 minutes for their presentation and their 5 minutes for questions. So we asked one of the questions, but if you want to look at more of the questions on the Whova platform, you can also write replies to them as well. Yep. Yeah. Thank you very much, Catherine. Okay, then I give it to Fiona to introduce our last speaker.
Thank you, Jessica. So our final presentation in this session is a new work in non-energy benefits and impacts, presented by Lisa Skumatz, who is the principal of Skumatz Economic Research Associates, a research and consulting firm with a US-wide clientele. She has more than 40 years of experience in energy efficiency evaluation work, and is especially known for her pioneering work in non-energy benefits. Over to your presentation, please, Lisa.
Hello, I'm Lisa Skumatz, and this is New Work in Non-Energy Benefits by Anne Vandervliet and myself of the NEBS consulting firm eceee. I'll discuss NEBS background, a huge NEBS database, 3 sets of NEB results, and sum up at the end. Non-energy benefits, also called non-energy impacts, also called co-benefits, also called multiple benefits, are all the same thing. I'm going to use NEBs because NEBs is easy to say. Net NEBs are the positive and negative effects beyond energy savings that are received from the installation of measures and interventions from energy efficiency programs. They have multiple uses, as you can see over at the right: marketing, program refinement, training the various actors involved in delivering and helping decide on programs and measures, policy and goals, particularly toward measuring quality of life goals and hardship goals for low-income participants, and benefit cost tests, which I'll be talking about more in a minute as well. The literature, starting back in about the robust literature, starting back in about the mid-1990s, early 1990s, addresses the utility, participant, and societal perspectives, addresses best management practices, best measurement practices, BMPs. And as you can see from the graph, the blue line tells us how many really data-laden reports are produced per year based on the lit review we've done, and the orange is other studies that address NEBs. Obviously, the orange line includes the studies in the blue line as well. They're adding hundreds of reports a year, as you can see, and a share of which have valuable or useful NEBs data. We conducted a comprehensive literature review in-house. Starting in 1994, we updated it periodically. We spent the last 2 years really updating it quite a bit, and provide NEBs results from 1,800 studies that reviewed, 1,200 we reviewed in detail, almost 800 are priorities and have great data, 500 we've entered, and it has led us to 43,450 plus lines of NEBs and NEBs input data in a sortable database with sources, scores, reliability metrics, and automatic update. It lets us do comparisons, statistics, patterns, graphs, and that's the reason for this study, showing you what kinds of things can be done pretty quickly. That database leads into a NEBIT model that models up to about a little more than 150 NEBs, NEB categories. We decided to show a few examples of what could be done with no additional research or no additional lit review beyond this database. So here's the first application, an application on what can we learn about the state adders, state non-energy benefit adders that are used across the US. So let's start with what NEBIT data can be used to examine state adders. Well, we can look at what are the state adders in the first place. So across the US, energy efficiency measures, programs, and portfolios are screened and have to test basic benefit cost analysis or cost effectiveness tests. There are 5 main tests that have been constructed, generally coming from some older California work, and they depend on the perspective that the tests are taking, that the state cares about in its program delivery. And different states also have tailored some of these tests as well, they're not all exactly the same. But there are benefits and costs, but they have various perspectives, and they are the UCT, the utility cost test, which uses the utility perspective or the program administrator perspective for both costs and benefits. Another is the RIM test, the rate impact test. That's the rates to the ratepayers, which are the same as the utility cost test, plus some changes in revenue. So it's a lot like the UCT. The participant cost test includes the participants' costs and benefits. The total resource cost includes the utility and participant perspective. And finally, the societal cost test includes the TRC plus the societal test, or the utilities and participant and societal tests, including for all the benefits and cost side of the equation. The difficulty is, while these are the tests in theory, in practice, when these tests were originally conceived, NEBs were considered hard to measure. You'd normally like all benefits over all costs, but in this case, not all the costs were not all the benefits were easily measured, so they were excluded. Hard to get these into the equations now once these metrics have been very constructed and carried out for a very long time. So we're trying now, after the fact, to get this less bias through incorporating NEBs. Well, a lot of states were reluctant to measure NEBs for every single NEB, so they put in adders as proxies for these NEBs, and different states have different ones. Colorado uses 10% electric, 5% gas, 25% low income, and there are different states use different adders. Many don't use any adders. and some have other dollar adders. Others have a hybrid of dollars plus percentages, or percentages plus measured, or measured, and so on. But in any case, if you're going to pick one thing that's used most commonly, it's a percentage adder multiplied times the energy savings. These are often negotiated. They're quite contrary processes in some cases. And some of these adders have been in place for more than 10 years, back when some of the NEBS literature was was a little bit more rudimentary. So the question was, are the typical adder values that are in different states reasonable stand-ins for the value of the NEBS in benefit cost tests? We estimated it using this database, the slit review database that we provided. So let's look at the first one. A typical non-energy benefit adder in different states is about 30% added on to the energy savings. That's what that first bar represents. Now, if we carry that over to the estimates that we pulled from the database for low-income programs, the estimates that are appropriate for the utility perspective, the societal perspective, and the participants' perspective. All the NEBs that are part of those different perspectives are ranked. We have the most reliable NEBs at the bottom going up to the least reliable NEBs at the top. And I've also, as a reminder, put what cost tests are relevant for those particular perspectives, or which cost tests include that particular perspective. Utility cost test, total resource test, et cetera, et cetera. What we find is that even if you're talking about only the most reliable NEBs, the ones less than half the way up the curve or even less, that adder it understates the NEBs for any of the cost tests that we're talking about. Only the utility cost test, we have utility cost NEBs above and beyond that 15%, that 30% level. Similarly, if we're going to add in, if we're going to have the societal test, we're going to be adding all three of these columns together, and that's going to be much, much higher than the 30% we're talking about. So even if we took the very most reliable, we're still massively understating the potential NEBs that could be added, even using some of the most reliable literature. The next one, the 15% adder is pretty common for residential programs, and you can see again that the values that are available from even quite reliable literature understate the total of the NEBs that could be justified if you used estimated NEBs. Finally, the commercial side, which is again about a 10-15% adder, we see that that understates the NEBs as well. That could be used. The current multipliers are very conservative. The NEBs in the commercial sector aren't as often estimated, and we lack much in the way of utility NEBs to begin with. Why haven't measured NEBs been used in more and more states? It's because of a number of things. People are concerned that they're expensive, cost concerns. They're afraid they're not local. They are worried about program budgets, and more programs will be approved, or more measures will be approved. That it's a cumbersome process to change. The stakeholder adoption of changes to the benefit cost is an onerous process. I think that the number one reason is that engineers and others who are very concerned about the benefit cost equation and its accuracy are concerned about a process that involves, it starts to include softer things like comfort and other items in the calculations. But if you look at the list of things that are included in the benefit cost equation already, we have at least two elements that are much less reliable than even the NEBs, even the least reliable NEBs, or at least on the same par. That would be net to gross, which is also based on a survey. It's incomplete. It uses Likert scales and other things that with relatively arbitrary numeric assignments. We also have, and we also exclude part of net to gross to begin with in many cases. The measure lifetime, or what's called EUL here, those are based on numbers that are well over 20 years old, not really based on the current technologies, and have great variations across different jurisdictions in the US, with no explanation about why a number would be much bigger in an area that's, say, hotter or colder or whatever than in other areas. NEBS is no worse than many of the numbers that are in there, and I think it's better than most. Another application that we looked at was exploring hardship indicators. When we're looking at low-income programs, in many cases, the rationale for those low-income programs is not related to energy savings. Rather, it's related to providing energy savings, but especially addressing hardship or providing some relief on hardship or a quality of life. What does the database tell us about what kinds of numbers have been measured for quality of life and hardship benefits in NEBs that are already out there in the literature? Well, it depends on what definition your program or your policies assign to hardship. Does hardship mean direct financial benefits? Is it really about bill payment improvements, or is it about direct financial savings? Does it also mean to include sort of a quality of life indicator, things like lowering illness incidences and so on? Is it something about housing security? If so, we might have one or more of these different stacks of benefits in the equation. If you include, our estimates show that if you include only the direct financial in your definition, you're looking at numbers that are roughly twice as big as the energy savings. That would mean that the energy savings understate the total benefits. If you're looking at a definition that includes hardship plus quality of life plus housing stock, you could be looking at as much as 5 times the energy savings. So this gives you an idea of the range of how we can measure hardship. We can measure hardship in a way that is appropriate with the goal, and we can do it in a way that shows what level of benefits this is providing. Last example is we're looking at transferability. Transferability is something that's really desired. People want to be able to use numbers from other locations, but the problem is that most of the information that's published on NEBs doesn't publish the information that lets you easily transfer numbers from one location to another, and therefore save money, have more comparable numbers between other places, and so on. Furthermore, a lot of the NEBs really aren't transferable from a fundamental point of view. Some depend very much on the participant targets. So you're not going to get as much hardship benefit if your program is targeted at the commercial sector or something like that. So some of these are really dependent on the type of program you're talking about, so they're not very transferable. Others, though, are, and I think it's really important to look at the ways we can make these numbers more transferable. One is make them measure-based. 2, because that lets you take that measure, no matter what program it's put in, has some fundamental attributes and NEBs that it transfers. Other is percentage of savings. If that lets you scale for the size of the program or the size of the amount of measures put in place. If you have information about the participant size, then you can control a little bit better for the commercial sector that is small versus very large commercial sector businesses. And also participant characteristics I already talked about, sort of low income versus standard res and so on. Many non-energy impact publications omit that program data that you need to construct some of these normalizing equations that would let you transfer these NEBs to more locations. Finally, in summary, there's more than 25 years of research in NEBs, and we've done a comprehensive lit review that shows you that it's really straightforward to apply the existing NEBs research to a number of different kinds of topics. To hardship, where savings are multiples of the energy savings. To the U.S. benefit cost test analysis work, where it shows that the adders that are in place are far more conservative than research would suggest is appropriate, or at least justifiable. And the transferability of NEBs is limited from inherent issues of what is transferable, as well as the fact that a number of these publications don't have information that allows you to normalize and therefore let you scale or transfer NEBs to other locations. I think it's really helpful to have an extensive literature review that lets us use values for in-depth review of program, policy, research, and methods questions. Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.
Sorry, a bit slow to unmute myself there. Thank you very much, Lisa. That was fascinating. While we're waiting for the attendees to come up with some questions, I have a few of mine. You include a lot of different types of NEBs in your presentation. Based on the evidence you've accumulated, which do you think is the most undervalued NEB in most utility residential program?
I think the literature is growing in health, and I think health is a topic that's very important to what households and businesses do and ought to consider in making energy efficiency changes. We saw early work in health looking at health as the topic. We found that it was difficult to come up with dollar values associated with something as broad as health. And so the industry over the last, say, 7, 8, 9 years has changed to measuring individual categories of illnesses and using that as sort of the way in to saying, look at how big health is. And so, we see ranked, asthma being one of the first ones that were evaluated, allergies, cold symptoms, and so on and so forth. I think that's one that's really important. I think there are a lot of commercial ones that have not been fully investigated, and that's, and there's a lot of gap in the commercial sector. I think some of those are really important. I used the example of hardship because I thought that for quite some time the hand waving around what are the benefits for, or the purported difficulty of measuring impacts on hardship, I thought were overstated. And there's a lot of information out there. I really wanted to make it clear that there's a stack of benefits that are all related to hardship, and it's not impossible. NEBS has really taken a lot of work in that area, and so I think that shows progress, and that we don't have to hand wave anymore. We're making a difference.
Okay, great. The outer values clearly get a lot of scrutiny. From your experience, I mean, it sounds like there is enough evidence to persuade regulators, but there's the resistance. What do you think? Presumably, do you think we've got to the point where more evidence isn't actually going to change? Is it about how you present the evidence that matters? What do you think will sort of can break through this resistance?
Sure. I think that on the regulator side, we are making progress in the US, I'm happy to say. We sort of started, when I have more time, I can present one that shows sort of the domino effect that we've been having across the US. Some of the work that I did in 2001 was used to develop the first low-income public purpose test, which was a refinement of the existing tests for the state of California. And that work was early on, but it was early enough in the literature that there weren't these thousands of studies that we've been able to analyze, and so people were not confident about that. So spent the next 10 years, sort of conducting more research, and I'd say in the next one was probably 2009, 2008 to 2010. We did work in Colorado that led to some of their adder that had a domino effect on Vermont, which had a domino effect on whatever, and now Maryland has, Massachusetts allows for a wide variety of NEBs. Oregon allows well-measured NEBs, but Maryland has some language that finally opens the door to recognizing that as a theoretical construct, you need to include the appropriate NEBs on the sort of numerator side and not just all the costs on the bottom, but not all the benefits on the top. They said they would accept the NEBs that were measured for that study, and as more in that proper perspective become available, they expect to see them added as well.
That sounds like a major breakthrough. So congratulations to all involved. Right, we're getting close to the end of the session, so I think it would be good to open up to a, sorry, I'm just getting a message.
A general discussion. So if our other speakers also want to put on their videos, we can ask a few more general reflections of you, and maybe someone has a question for another speaker here. Now is your chance to be able to ask. But if we don't have a question from one speaker to another, I have questions also for all of you. Talked about co-benefits, and some of you were talking with an audience in mind, or co-benefits to certain stakeholders, or co-benefits generally. I think, Catherine, you had quite a specific audience here with the businesses that you were working with. And one of the questions that had come in was, have you also thought about doing this with policymakers, this approach? Was that also something that you were looking at? And for others too, do you think that there's different co-benefits depending on which audience you're actually communicating about co-benefits too. So maybe Catherine, if you want to start with this and your approach, and did you think about also policymakers? Oh, you need to unmute.
Yes, so there are certainly three targets. One target are the energy experts. The second, which is actually more important, I came to that conclusion after several years, but are the CEOs of companies. So just to find decision makers, because these people give the impulse to energy experts. And then, yes, of course, policymakers, because they can embed the non-energy benefits into energy audits and so on. Yeah, so definitely, it's a yes. I'd like policymakers, or we would like policymakers to take this approach and develop it in their
Lisa.
policies.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Catherine. Lisa,
Thanks.
you have something to comment?
Yes, we use different segments of the NEBs for different folks. For instance, for advertisement, we tend to focus on the participant benefits, whether that's residential or commercial. We've seen lots of advertisements that take that benefit as the focus of particular ads, trying to get finally beyond trying to push energy efficiency to people who already know about energy efficiency, and that's not the reason they're making the decisions. So we've seen ads that lead with comfort or lead with healthy homes and things like that, and lead with productivity in the commercial sector. So that's been great to see that actually operationalized. We see one of the other ones is, the utility perspective takes a completely different tack on things, and the NEBs that they care about and that they need to be presented with are things like system reliability, system resiliency, and other financial benefits, lower fire and insurance risk, and other things like that that come from programs. Absolutely, each one takes different pieces of the NEBs, and they care about it in different ways. Financial, pictures, and sort of warm fuzzy things, lots, and societal, way different. We're talking about the jobs benefits and so on that come out of these programs are a very big concern to communities and the territories where these programs are put in place. Lots of different perspectives.
Yep. Suna.
Yeah, I would say that that we are actually targeting a lot of our communication to media. Not that we don't want to approach politicians or professional house builders, all of them, but actually trying to set an agenda and create awareness also for end users. But certainly in the media, really showing the numbers that are quite significant, and thereby actually when you do communications that are not like the Healthy Homes Barometer, it's scientific, it's co-branded by the institutes, but we try to write in a way that the media can pick up the messages, and also we find a lot of politicians prefer it like that. in fact, instead of scientific papers. So that's really the approach, and of course we try to influence the ongoing negotiation about the EPBD, etc. So we do that both on this kind of a media level, but also like bilaterally to different politicians and civil servants in EU and member states.
If I can make one quick add, I forgot to mention that also the way in which the numbers are expressed can make a difference as well. We did some work on non-energy benefits from commissioning, and we explored different ways to present it, not just in dollars or percent, but dollars per square foot, dollars per dollar invested, things like that. So putting the NEBs in the terms that the users want and will relate to most was also very important. Sorry.
Thanks for that, Lisa. Nazifa or Suran, did you also, you talked about different contexts, but did you also see this different stakeholders and the need to communicate different non-energy benefits to different stakeholders?
I mean, of course. So, there is definitely a need to understand that what are the co-benefits for different group of stakeholders, and accordingly, the cost-benefit analysis or the NPV values would also change as per the different stakeholder focus. That is also, a fundamental part we need to see. But before that, at least for less developed nation, it is really important for us to do the first step, that is to identify and quantify the co-benefits. And for EU, at least, we have some level of quantification methodology for some of the co-benefits, but a rigorous identification methodology is required. And hence through that, we can channelize and mainstream the, co-benefit quantification. And hence, then we can have separate stakeholder group identified and quantified for them.
Thanks. Are there any other concluding thoughts here as we're reaching the end of our time lap? But if there's something else that somebody wants to bring up, now is the time.
It's just one reflection, and that is, we've been working with energy efficiency like on a political scale for the last 40 years, more or less, and we know all the benefits when it comes to energy savings, all of that. That's a good business case for governments to invest in, and still it's not really happening. So I really think that this presentation shown today here in this panel really shows how big potential is to really spread the word about the non-energy benefits, and hopefully really incentivize politicians and also end users to actually do something here.
And I think the domino effect helps as well. The US example where a few states did it, now about half the states in the US have at least an adder or some recognition of NEBs in some way. So I think that example helps, seeing somebody take that stab and letting it ripple out.
Yeah, it's easier to follow examples already, isn't it? There. Any other thoughts? So,
just one additive comment on Soon presentation. It was a great presentation, and I would like to highlight that one of the reasons why co-benefits are not, getting into mainstream policy evaluation is one of the critical co-benefit is health, and one of the most common measure we use is DALI. And whenever we try to monetize DALI, it becomes a very much, ethical issues. So therefore, it is often we face this problem, and we even get, comments from journal reviewers and policymakers directly that, are you quantifying and monetizing life? So, this type of issues are also there, and these are actually in a way a methodological barrier to mainstreaming co-benefits. Probably we need to overcome that as well. Yeah.
I just one quick reply on that, because I very much agree, Søren. It's always a problem to explain DALIs, and actually for the next Healthy Homes Barometer 2021, we don't use DALIs. We're looking at the working age population, and we go in a different direction. We actually try to say what are the laws for societal and regards to productivity and the direct health costs when you have unhealthy buildings, and do that correlation instead, because that is definitely something politicians can relate to, and it doesn't seem like this magic number juggling. So yeah, I very much agree.
yeah. Okay. Thank you very much to all of our speakers for a very interesting presentations, very interesting session. I want to remind everyone, both speakers and audience, that in 10 minutes now, or 11 minutes, we have the informal session, energy and comfort indicators. So there we also have a non-energy indicator here, and also the end of day hangout for the eceee. So thank you very much. It is going now to our informal sessions and our end of the day wrap up. Thanks again, and see you all later. Fiona?
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye, thank you.